I'm trying to think what my life was like before. Geez, pre-Miles, I mean, I'd never been to Asia, never been to South America. I think I'd been to Europe maybe once or twice when I was in high school.
Before frequent flyer miles, I'm frankly just a farm boy from Iowa. I was a military brat. My father was in the U.S. Marine Corps and stationed wherever the Marines are.
You know, everybody has a hobby. Mine is, you know, flying, and people spend money on their hobbies, and so I just enjoy flying. That's part of my hobby. Some people buy toy trains, some people, you know, paint, some people collect watches. I, you know, fly places for lunch and come home that night. So, yeah.
This is me on board a Japan Airlines 777 in a very small economy class seat. I'm in the exit row though, with lots of legroom thanks to my executive platinum status with partner American Airlines, which also allowed me to visit the first class lounge at Tokyo, where I had free sushi and draft beer and generally lived the life. And I'm on this flight for free. Heavy jets, great circle routes, airport transfers in strange cities, hundreds of thousands of frequent flyer miles. I love this world. I recently hit 1 million lifetime miles with American. This after 8 years or so of moderately obsessive behavior. But among others that do this sort of thing, I'm a lightweight. In search of the heavy hitters, I went to a meeting in Florida for the 160,000 member strong website flyertalk.com, the online hub for all things miles and points. I did the obvious and flew there from San Francisco via Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, and Tampa to squeeze an extra 500 miles or so out of the routing.
I'm Tommy 777. Tommy is also my real name. I'm also soon to be a part of the Lufthansa family, Scandinavian Airlines.
Yeah, 2 points for...
I flew one business class from Asia to North America, and I got Star Gold status. Just in that.
With the bonuses?
Yeah, because they give the double bonuses, and then they give another bonus once that kicks in.
Flyer Talk is pretty much a website and a bulletin board for the frequent flyer junkie, which is a relatively new subspecies of traveler, where people pretty much obsess about how to earn as many miles as possible, as cheaply as possible, and then to spend them as extravagantly as possible.
We're closing on 11 million posts up there, and you know, when I tell people that, it says, how could people talk about frequent flyer miles 11 million times?
People want to talk about, hey, this is the best way to do fill in the blank, whether it's a crazy mileage run to a bunch of different cities or how to make sure you get top tier status on the airline you want.
I don't think there's a defined demographic. It's more of a defined psychographic, which is, you know, just psychotic in a good way about earning and burning miles.
Frequent flyers tend to be very social in nature by the shared interest in frequent flyer miles, but like anything else, Corvettes, needlepoint, you name it out there. The interesting thing is miles give them that feeling of freedom that, yeah, let's pop off to London and see so-and-so, and for the rest of the world, you wouldn't think of doing that, but understand that the first draw of frequent flyer mile is the freedom of seeing the world that you normally would not have done.
Another flight. and I'm a little bored on this one.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Osaka International, Osaka Kansai International Airport.
I've come to Japan again, just for the weekend this time, to talk with the writer Pico Iyer. This is one of my favorite parts, fresh off of a trans-Pacific flight, a bit bleary-eyed. And somehow, it's more fun knowing I'll be leaving again in a couple of days.
You may be the first documentary filmmaker in the history of this town, which is a pretty new town, to chronicle it. Often these days, if I'm invited for a conference somewhere or a not very exciting work-related job, my first thought will be, well, I will accumulate 20,000 miles in the course of this, which will allow me to do something more fun. I can see frequent flyer miles could become an addiction, especially because the whole process of travel makes you a bit deranged and makes you not yourself.
It started as a simple marketing tactic. In the late 1970s and early 80s, deregulation meant that the airlines would have to compete fiercely for customers. An ad agency for American Airlines had a thought. Can we bring people over to the airline by giving away some of these empty seats? The frequent flyer program was born. When I was 18, I stumbled across a beautiful scheme while looking into whether these mysterious miles might be of some use to me. I lived in New York and needed to go to Europe to visit my mom and Japan to visit my dad. It turned out that by signing up for a special challenge and flying with American Airlines, I would get platinum status from the 2 round trips I had to take anyway. That meant double miles on all flights, priority check-in, lounges, and more. I was hooked. The catch, of course, is that in most cases, you have to requalify every year.
Now that I'm executive platinum, I could never see myself going back because those system-wide upgrades, they're worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So if I spend, let's say next year I'm only going to fly 80,000 miles. Well, if it's going to cost me another $1,000 to get the 20,000 miles, well, God, sure, it's worth $1,000 to be able to fly to Europe 4 times in business class for nothing. I mean, that's, huge.
Frequent flyer programs are like mazes, with so many rules, conditions, and exceptions that getting anywhere with your miles can seem impossible. But for the really dedicated, there are riches to be had. Free seats and upgrades in great amounts. At the core of all this, the pursuit of elite status.
Yeah, I mean, elite status really is the difference between, in my opinion, the difference between flying to get somewhere and enjoying flying.
This is Tom, my friend since we were 14. He works as a general manager at a restaurant and spends all of his extra money on travel and the pursuit of miles.
757 landing.
I was known to be a terrible, terrible, rambunctious child. But in an airport, I was very well behaved because all I do is stand by the window and look at planes, and I was very, very low maintenance once I was actually in an airport. The airport's crazy, immigration's a nightmare. Airport's corrupt, you have to tip somebody to get through, various barriers and speed your way through security. You see, the British Airways plane sitting there, the tail light on so you can see the logo shining, and everything about it is just, kind of perfectly sitting there in the dusty Saudi Arabian night.
I've seen mileage runs that people put together that are 15, 16 segments where they'll bounce around the West Coast where there are a lot of cities close together, and they'll do a Dallas to San Francisco, down to LA, and then Las Vegas, and then back to Palm Springs, and from Palm Springs to Dallas. And
mileage run is, probably has many different definitions. It's a trip that you take for no other reason than to simply build up an additional inventory of frequent flyer miles.
The fare was real cheap, or there was a big promotion or a huge bonus that was involved with flying. So there are literally people who will get on a plane from Cleveland, fly to Honolulu, stay there for 6 hours, and then on the next flight they're back home in time for work Monday morning.
There are people that post threads about it, you know, say I had to apologize to my spouse or to my girlfriend for what have you, and a lot of it revolves around the people that do mileage runs, or, you know, force their family to eat a specific type of food just so they can get miles.
My first mileage run was from New York to San Diego and back in 2004. I flew out via Los Angeles in the morning, waited in the airport at San Diego for 4 hours, then flew back to New York overnight. I did this twice in a couple of weeks and made a short movie about it. There I was, sitting in the airport, my destination for the day. I was sort of in San Diego, but mostly not, just pausing briefly along the way. I had taken myself out of daily life for 24 hours and I found myself enjoying it. It felt like meditation.
Captain John Nye is in charge of our aircraft. He's assisted by First Officer Jay Pelliconi.
Well, so I've always been interested in the way that airports are almost compact cities. You can pray there, you can go swimming there, you can go bowling. Some airports have microbreweries, some of them have mini rainforests in them. And so I actually went once and spent a whole week, or more than a week, living in and around Los Angeles Airport. And I suppose my sense was that the airport is a perfect microcosm of the city of the future. All the cultures of the world are assembling under one roof, but they're all walking and talking past one another. It seemed to me that cities were coming to be more and more like airports. And of course airports are coming to be more and more like cities. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport alone is larger than the whole of Manhattan. And I think of the 21st century as a century in which more and more people, especially the young, are living in the metaphorical equivalent of an airport passageway.
We're in the flagship lounge at JFK in New York. We specifically flew through here because we get way more miles, and the lounge here is significantly nicer than the other options, which would be in Dallas or Miami for getting down to Buenos Aires.
This was the first stop on a trip I took with Tom designed to maximize mileage and airline experiences. 8 flights and 3 countries over 6 days. The routing took us out from San Francisco to New York, then down to Buenos Aires, 15+ hours of flying, then quickly over to Uruguay, up the coast a ways by car, before heading back to Buenos Aires for an evening.
It's fun to see a Qantas plane from Australia in Argentina, in Buenos Aires.
Why?
It's a little bit out of the way, and it's one of the most southern air routes in the world, I think, Sydney to Buenos Aires.
We then continued up to Brazil via Brasilia to Recife, before heading back via Miami to the west coast. On American Airlines, we earned 14,290 base miles, another 14,290 for our standard elite status bonus, and 3,838 additional bonus miles due to a Brazil promotion, for a total of 32,418. When one of our flights was delayed, we got another 15,000 miles as a customer service bonus, bringing the grand total to 47,418. In all, enough miles for a free round-trip ticket to Europe.
I think it was so clever of the airline companies initially to spot this kind of soft spot in our psychology and to realize how wonderfully they could play too on this and make us beholden to them in a way that we never would be otherwise.
The person with the most miles in a single account has over 100 million miles in their account. That's a pretty big number. Now, granted, a lot of that comes from credit card purchases and other stuff, but that's the realm of what miles have become these days.
There's virtually nothing you can't buy anymore and not earn airline miles for them, so it's its own currency now.
It's estimated that there are between 17 and 20 trillion unspent miles in frequent flyer accounts worldwide. In theory, that's enough miles to redeem 800 million free domestic plane tickets, or 160 million first-class tickets to Asia. The Economist magazine in 2005 calculated the worldwide stock of unredeemed miles at that time to be worth more than all the US dollar bills in circulation.
Figuring out the rules and the promos and when to buy, when to fly, somebody really with a minimal amount of money can parlay that into a very, very respectable amount of miles into their account.
There have been times where I've literally sat up, for 3 or 4 hours at a time, just looking at a program and dissecting every single every single earning and burning rule or policy to figure out, is this a program that I want to get involved with?
In 2001, while doing just that, he came across an $8 airfare being offered between two cities in northern Thailand and saw an opportunity.
And over the course of 3 weeks, I created a labor infrastructure from scratch, hired 10 handicapped people, 10 unemployed rice farmers to fly back and forth on this route for $8, 4 times a day, for 6 weeks straight.
He was accumulating enough miles for dozens of free plane tickets without leaving the ground, and his Thai employees were getting 3 times the local minimum wage for spending all day in the air. Right as his operation was in full swing, the local US DEA office asked him to come in for a chat.
I pull out my spreadsheet. I said, look, I'm just earning, 4 million frequent flyer miles. These people are just going to fly back and forth. He says, do you realize where you are? This is called the Golden Triangle. Do you know what the Golden Triangle is? There's drug mules going all the time between these 2 cities. So we just thought you were one of the stupidest, drug runners out there. So at the end of the conversation, he says, can you maybe get one other guy to fly and, let me buy these miles from you? He says, because, I have to go back to the States all the time. And now that I know this is legit, I'd love to earn some miles too.
So have we all lost our minds a little? I do wonder about it. And what about the environment? Your carbon footprint doesn't look great when you're flying a round trip without stopping. Some would say that the planes would fly anyway, with or without the mileage runners. And as for the relentless quest, the constant pursuit of miles, it's working out well for me. My best redemption to date, 230,000 miles for a 10-segment round-the-world trip in first. Here I am feeling important because I'm in row 1 on a British Airways 747, right behind the nose cone, with a view that looks partially forward due to the curvature of the fuselage.
It would be fun to kind of just, at some point it would get a little bit old, but to have, a week-long vacation that almost existed as an airport transfer to airport transfer to airport transfer, which is really what has been done quite a bit, and even on this trip. If it weren't for frequent flyer miles, there would be no real reason any of us would be here, because we wouldn't have chased the status, so we wouldn't have the status. We wouldn't have continued to chase it further to get better than platinum, which is executive platinum, and I wouldn't have been able, and you wouldn't now have been able to earn the upgrades to upgrade us to business class instead of flying economy class. So basically the entire trip is because we've been chasing miles, and now we're sort of reaping some of the rewards, while at the same time it's only January 6th, but the new year has begun to requalify again, so got to start adding the miles because all of our counters set to 0 6 days ago.
By 1991, I noticed I'd already accumulated 1.5 million miles on United Airlines. And that's when I started spending time in the monastery. I thought, well, I'm actually covering the movement part of my life very sufficiently, but probably this may have long-term consequences just to be permanently spinning around the globe. Yeah, I think travel really is a kind of drug, and it is a foreign influence, and it is an exhilaration, and that's part of why the frequent flyer program is so successful, because I think most of us, something quickens in us as soon as we get on a plane. And for those of us who like planes and who like the unknown, anywhere I would be going tomorrow would actually be exciting and interesting to me.